Good evening, YouTube and bodybuilding enthusiasts and friends, family, everybody. Today I've got my pappy here on the YouTube channel with me, and this is a slightly different topic than what we're usually doing on this channel. Usually we're discussing bodybuilding and how to train and how to eat, and we're going to be discussing a little bit of that today. But my pop, he's got a pretty interesting story. It's also a story that could educate a lot of people and probably, believe it or not, save some people's lives, because he's been through the ringer with. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer. It's been
8 years.
8 years ago now.
Yeah. 8 years in August.
So he's got a lot of insight as far as that goes, and what made me want to have him on the show is because even during all of his treatment and going from 230 pounds down to 180 something pounds, he's still showing up at the gym 3 to 4 times a week, and he's giving it hell down there. So I obviously got a lot of respect for him for that, and it's inspiring to see somebody who's going through that, and I just wanted him to be able to share his story and, like I said, share a little knowledge with everybody. So when you first learned that you had cancer, you were
67.
67. So what were your thoughts when you first learned that you had it, and also your stature too? Kind of go over where you were. I mean, you've always worked out pretty much your whole life. You've always been. I remember you being big and strong, when I was a kid. So.
Well, in retrospect, it was it was a tough. The first thing you think of when somebody says you've got cancer is, I may die from it, and you very well could. But that was my first initial thoughts. Is like, how long have I got? What can I do to extend my life? And do I want to extend my life? Because I know it could be, your remaining life could be miserable based on what all treatments that you decide to take, decide to let the doctors take. So that was my first thoughts. And also in retrospect, I was 67 years old, and when I started declining, I didn't realize how good a shape. Now, I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I didn't realize how good a shape I was in until I started losing it. I was still strong, and I'd do cardio most every day after a workout, and unless somebody in the family died or I had to work, I would go to the gym, at least 4 or 5 days a week. So. But in retrospect, I guess the first thought in your mind is, am I going to die? And then the next thought, I guess, was, I thought about my mother. To make a long story short, she has survived since 1986 or 1987. She survived 4 different kinds of major life-threatening cancer. First in the colon, then in the liver, then in the lungs, then in the kidneys. And I thought, why can't I be like her? Here she is. She's 91 years old now, and she's beginning to decline, but she never thought she would make it this far. And quite honestly, at the time she was diagnosed with all that, we didn't think she would either. But she has. So my thought was, why can't I do the same thing and follow some of the same protocols that actually I recommended to her to help her survive it?
And as far as, I guess the first question that comes to mind is, what do you think caused it? What was the cause of it? Now, there's speculation, of course, amongst, if you read clinical trials, and when you got it, I myself started reading more and more about it because I was trying to learn. But in your opinion, what do you think was the cause of it?
I honestly don't know. I know that there's a few things that it could be. Way back when I was young and dumb, I smoked, and I really smoked. So that could have had a factor in it. When I was in Vietnam, I was exposed, like most GIs over there, to Agent Orange, which is glyphosate, the stuff they put on our food now, by the way.
Isn't that what's in Roundup too?
Yeah, that is Roundup, except Roundup's a milder version. I was on testosterone therapy through a doctor, and that's one of the risks that it could cause cancer. It could cause blood clots. And before he prescribed it to me, he said, if you're willing to take the risk, I'll prescribe you this, where you don't ever have to worry about going and getting it, illegally or whatever. So it could have been partly that. It could have been the fact that I used to smoke. It could have been partly Agent Orange, but that's been many years ago. But honestly, I don't know. If I had to really guess, I would think it was probably the testosterone therapy, because I was taking actually more than the doctor recommended.
Okay. Well, just from, like I said, I didn't really start reading about it until I learned that you had cancer. So I was looking for solutions and causes and all that. But just from what I've read and gathered and enough to form an opinion, it seems like it's the imbalance of hormones that could be something that triggers it there. And again, I'm theorizing here, but we know that DHT definitely triggers it because that'll occupy your androgen receptors. And there was one study, I sent it to you actually, where they took cross-sectional, they did the scrape where they took biopsy, that's the word I'm looking for, biopsies of the prostates of men who had passed away from prostate cancer. And they found huge amounts of estradiol, and which, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's just the most powerful form of estrogen in your body. And when you take testosterone, it in part is converted to estrogen, estradiol, and like I said, it seems like, because what we know is that the people who are least likely to get prostate cancer are basically younger men, and those are the ones who have the highest natural testosterone level. So logically speaking, it doesn't seem like testosterone would cause it, but maybe, like you said, taking too much threw everything else off, and that could have triggered it as well. So,
well, I wasn't doing anything to stop the production of estrogen and estradiol. I wasn't taking anything at all, and I probably should have. A bodybuilder friend of mine, Terry Holland, he told me one time, he said, if you're taking that, he said, you need to be taking something to keep your estradiol down. And I really didn't take heed of that. Mm-hmm. And that could have been a big part of it.
And in hindsight, too, something to control the DHT conversion as well.
Yeah.
That seems to affect it negatively, too. So initially, when you go to the doctor, they've got a protocol that they're supposed to follow. And usually, and this is something that you mentioned to me, and after I read about it, I realized, wow, that's really true. The first thing they want you to do is get a biopsy.
That's the first problem right there.
And that's what you explained to me.
A needle biopsy, yeah.
And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, they basically go in there and they take, is it 9 different spots?
13.
Oh, wow. So they took more. They basically stick a syringe and aspirate.
For prostate cancer, of course, it depends on the type of cancer, but prostate cancer, they go in your rectum, through your rectum wall, into your prostate 13 times.
Wow.
And pull plugs out, and then have each one of them biopsied. And that's what they determine the severity, the initial severity of your prostate cancer, using those plugs. For me, they give you what they call a Gleason score based on that. And all that does is tell you how much cancer you have in your prostate and the likelihood of it being more severe and spreading or already spread. And my Gleason score was a moderate risk, which it was a Gleason score 7, and they give you like two numbers with that, and mine were the 3 and a 4. Now I don't really remember what all that means, but it's a 3 and a 4 is better than a 4 and a 3, is what I was told. And it was moderate risk that it could be already spread or it could spread. If you got a Gleason score less than 7, which is a 6, they will generally just monitor you for a while, which I don't agree with. But the higher the Gleason score, the more chance that you might have more extensive cancer.
So another indicator that usually, if you're a male and you go get blood work done, if it's like a male hormone panel or something, they usually include something called PSA in your, and you know that of course,
Yeah.
in your blood work. But for anybody again who doesn't know what your PSA is, or if you're not getting it checked and you're, I would even say in your mid to late 30s, early 40s, that's something you should probably start keeping an eye on. But that's basically, it's called prostate specific
antigen. That's really the first indicator.
And that was your first indicator.
That's your first indicator. I used to get a physical almost every year. And I went about 3, maybe 4 years and did not get a physical. And so I decided, well, I better get one because I'm 67 years old now. So I went and got a physical, and they called me back the next day, or a couple of days after, and said, your blood work looks great, especially for a man your age. Everything's just perfect, but your PSA is 15. And of course, I know what that means. And I said, you mean 1.5? She said, no, sir, it's 15. Which is an extremely high PSA.
And usually if it's anything above 4, that's
Right.
what raises an eyebrow.
Right, and knowing what I know now, when mine got above 3, I would start looking at it right away. And any man out there that's watching this, you too, you and Michael, any of my sons, if yours ever gets around 3, you probably need to get it seriously looked at. Because you can have prostate cancer with a low PSA. I think last time yours was checked was like 0.9, you told me.
It's usually around 0.8, but
0.8.
then I told you last time I got it checked, it was like 1.1, and
Yeah.
I went, whoa.
Yeah. So,
And then I went back and got it checked again, and it was back down to 0.8 again. So I don't know what, it was only 0.3 points. But it's at the same time, knowing our family history now, I'm watching that like a hawk because of you.
Yeah.
So every time I get blood work, my PSA is always included in it now, and it's because of you.
Yeah, but that's the first indicator. And actually, a little side story here. I had gotten the physical, and they called me and told me my PSA was 15, and I needed to get an appointment with a urologist. So I did, and I went, and that's when I was ignorant at the time about the implications of getting a biopsy. So I let him have a biopsy, and it just so happened our family, you included, and all of your brothers, and we were in Florida. And we had gotten up one morning, had breakfast, and we all went to the gym so we could get a good workout and then go have fun the rest of the day. And Sandy and I had just pulled up to the gym, and we're about to get out and go in the gym. You were already there. And my phone rang, and it was my urologist. And he said, well, the results of your biopsy, came back, and you've got prostate cancer. So, I didn't want to spoil everybody's vacation, so I didn't even mention it to anybody till weeks later. But that's, that kind of ruined our vacation because you can't think about anything else, and it's hard to act normal when you've just been told that you've got prostate cancer.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember when you first told me that you had it, and you told me we were in Florida, and I was like, wow, you didn't say anything to anybody for this long?
Yeah, I didn't want to. It's not that I didn't want y'all to know, it's that I just didn't want to bring it up during vacation.
Yeah.
Because that would have been the whole topic of conversation, and it would have put a dark cloud over our vacation. and I tried to enjoy it as much as I could, and we all did, you know.
Hmm. Well, talking about the biopsies, if there's so anything to take away from that segment of what we just talked about is you don't want a biopsy.
Not a needle biopsy, no.
You need to get a MRI.
An MRI,
PET
well,
MRI, or what did you call it?
actually, there's a PET scan. It's called an Axumin PET scan, and they do pretty much the same thing they do with these new PSMA PET scans. They put radioactive glucose in your veins, and most every cancer, prostate cancer, is really hormone driven, but it also eats a lot of glucose. So if it accumulates in a certain area and they pick it up on the PET scan, that means you probably got cancer in that area. And so now some states, I don't know about Tennessee now, but in some states they won't allow any doctor to tell you definitively if you've got prostate cancer unless you get a needle biopsy. And if they do, they can lose their license. But in some states, they will let the doctors give you the PSMA PET scan or an Axumin PET scan, and they are much more sensitive than MRIs. Now, some doctors will do what they call a guided MRI, and if you've got significant cancer, it'll always show up. But if you've got little tiny pockets of cancer, they don't show up on MRIs. I think that's the reason a lot of people let cancer get way ahead of them, because MRIs are not nearly as sensitive as some of these new PET scans.
The Axuma.
Axumin, that's Axumin. That's the name of the substance
Okay.
put in you.
We never have said it yet, but when you do a needle biopsy, it's like sticking a pin in a water balloon as far as your cancer goes.
That's right.
So it immediately starts spreading throughout your body.
It can. It probably, it not always does probably, but it can. And the guy that gave me my first major treatment, a doctor in Florida, he wrote an entire book about, it was called The Dirty Little Secret About Biopsies and Prostate Cancer. And the premise, just about the whole book, talked about how it can spread and how a bunch of his cases where he knew men that had come to him for treatment that had needle biopsies and wound up with cancer in other places.
After you told me that, I started looking at clinical trials for that. And the one that I read said that the men who got the biopsy, 76% of those men had metastasized to the rest of their body.
Just spread by the needle, yeah.
So, yeah, 76%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's a huge number.
And I think that's what happened with mine.
I would almost guarantee it, because
yeah.
like you said earlier, the doctor said the rest of your blood work looks great.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had known then what you know now, and you had not,
Excuse me.
if you had not have done the needle biopsy, maybe you would have been able to get a handle on it, and it wouldn't have been such an extensive process.
I think the first treatment that I had would have gotten it all, but it did. We'll talk about treatments in a minute, I guess. But I think that very first thing that I did, which was kind of an alternative thing, would have gotten all of it. But it had already spread, what they call micrometastasis. You stick a needle in a piece of cancer and pull it out 13 times. Well, everywhere it touches, there's cancer cells spread.
Not to mention if it, dragged some cells out with it, and then that gets into circulation.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened with me.
So as far as and this is I mean, I didn't trust doctors before this, but having heard your story about your doctor, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here. But when you had a procedure called high frequency ultrasound,
High intensity focused ultrasound. Yeah.
And that supposedly killed all the cancer in your prostate. Mm-hmm. And that was a pretty long process where you had to do a catheter ended up being 6 months.
Yeah. Well, it was only supposed to be for like 3 or 4 weeks, But for some reason, I like to never got off that silly thing.
So, and you also, you had to take a drug called ADT, which basically knocks out your testosterone altogether, chemical castration kind of stuff.
Androgen deprivation therapy, that came later. Yeah. If you want to go back, that same bodybuilder friend of mine who was a pharmacist, doctor, Terry Holland, he told me about HIFU when I first told him I had cancer. And he said, what you need to do, don't do the radiation, don't do the cyber knife, don't do the, there's about 10 different ways you can go at it. He said, go call this doctor in Florida. I was at a seminar with him, and he said as long as it's contained in the prostate, he can get rid of it with HIFU. And he's got a special way that he does HIFU as opposed to the normal run-of-the-mill HIFU. So I did. I got in touch with the doctor, and I went to Florida and got that first treatment was HIFU.
Okay. So you got the HIFU, you got the ADT, and you did that for what, a couple of years?
Well, actually, I didn't start the ADT. I did the HIFU, and that was in like November of 2016. And he told me to wait about 5 or 6 weeks and have my PSA checked again. So I had it checked, and it had gone from 20, because it got as high as 20, and it got down to 0.11, and I thought, well, that's pretty good. But what I didn't realize is that it should have been 0. So that was, when I told my HIFU doctor that, my PSA was 0.11, he said, well, that's pretty good, but he said, I'm thinking it should have been 0. Maybe we just didn't wait long enough to get, to take a sample. So that was the beginning of a whole new journey right there.
And the PSA was coming from cancer cells that it spread.
Right. I didn't know it at the time, but yes, I suspected it.
And this is this next thing we're going to talk about is why you definitely shouldn't trust your doctor just because he tells you something. So after you had done the treatment, you did the ADT, your PSA is almost 0. Your doctor gave you a clean bill of health after that.
Well, yeah, my PSA got down to 0.11, and then I kept monitoring it every couple of months because, it should have been 0. So I went back later on, a few weeks later, and took another PSA, and I figured, well, it'll be 0 this time. But it wasn't. It was like, I don't know, it was 2 or 3 or something, 2.1, I can't remember. So I kept on getting tests, and eventually my PSA got back up to 8.3. Okay, so I go to the first urologist I had gone to, and I said, doc, something's not right here. My PSA ought to be 0, and it's 8.3, and that's not good. That's double the limit. So he said, well, let's do an MRI. And in the meantime, I had read, Sandy and I, and bless Sandy's heart, she did more looking into things than I did. More, what's the word I'm looking
Research?
for? Research. than I did. And we'd already read about the Axum and PET scan. They were relatively new at the time. And I said, I don't want an MRI. I want this Axum and PET scan because it's real sensitive, a lot more. And why didn't you tell me about that? He said, well, your insurance won't cover it. And that kind of made me angry. It's like, this is my life we're talking about here, and you're worried about whether insurance is going to cover it or not. So he said, well, let's just do the MRI first, and then we'll go from there.
Which you already knew wasn't going to show.
Well, I didn't know, but I said, okay, we'll do that. And what I think it was about money. I think he referred me to his MRI. The people he gets his MRIs done through, he probably gets a kickback. So I said, okay, let's do that. So we did it. And Sandy and I, my wife, went back 3 or 4 days after the scan and to his office, and he read the results, and he said, there's no cancer anywhere. You got a clean bill of health. You don't have any cancer. And I told him at the time, I said, Doc, I'm no doctor, but, if you've already had cancer, prostate cancer, and your PSA is back up to 8.3, there's something wrong somewhere. I said, will you please order this Axeman scan? Because I've already called the company, Centennial, it's the only place that did it. I've already called them and asked them to do it, and they said, well, you got to have a doctor's order. I said, so will you please order that? He said, okay, I'll order it, but I don't think it's going to show anything because the MRI didn't show anything. So he ordered it, and I had to pay for it. It was like $5,000. And I know a lot of people don't have $5,000 laying around. Long story short, I got most of that back because I paid cash. But anyway, I went and had the Axeman PET scan, and he got the results back a few days later and saying, I went back for the reading again, and I walked in, or he walked in, and he had kind of a sheepish look on his face and said, well, I know it's not what you want to hear, but you've got several pockets of cancer in your pelvic lymph nodes. And of course, that's a game changer right there. So had I listened to this doctor, who, by the way, wanted first to take out my prostate, that's his first impulse.
It's pretty much protocol.
Yeah, that's his protocol. So I said, no, I've already read about that too, side effects. But had I listened to him, once it's in your lymph nodes, that's like the superhighway of your whole body. And it spreads really fast from there. And had I listened to him and waited a few more months till like my PSA was 16 or 30 or whatever, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now.
There's no telling where that would have spread to in that time.
I know, it would have gone everywhere. Is it repelled with lymph nodes? Sometimes it'll go down. I mean, I've studied about all this. A lot of men, it goes to their femur first. But with a lot of men, it goes up into their rib cage. Their rib cage, their skull, and sometimes in their vital organs. And of course, when it gets into your bones, it inhibits your body's ability to produce red blood cells and white blood cells. And so that's eventually what you die for. You get so anemic you can't live anymore. So anyway, had I listened to him, and that's not the end of the story about doctors, but had I listened to him, I don't think I'd be sitting here right now talking. But fast forward a little bit, I'd had the HIFU, and then my PSA was 1.11, and then it started growing. Went back to my urologist. He said, oh, it's 8.3, but this MRI says you're okay, but the Axeman PET scan says it's spread. He said, I'm going to refer you to another doctor who's more adept to treating people with cancer that spread. And I didn't bother telling him that he was fired anyway, because had I listened to him.
Yeah.
So he sends me to another doctor, Dr. Morris, with Urology Associates out on Charlotte Avenue. Well, actually, they're all over Middle Tennessee. He sent me to him, and that's when he put me on ADT, androgen deprivation therapy. I had to take a shot in the stomach once a month, and my testosterone was already low because they took me off testosterone. But when I took that, my testosterone got to a flat 0. And that makes you feel like terrible, awful, every day. So he said, well, this will stop the cancer. And I said, well, I've got it in my pelvic lymph nodes, so, I know this will stop it from growing because it's basically a hormone-driven cancer. But, what are you going to do to kill the cancer? And he said, well, nothing. I'm just going to keep you on this. So I went and read about that. And this they call it hormone therapy. It works until it doesn't work. And then when it doesn't work anymore, that's the end. It's going to spread fast and you're going to leave. So I read all about that. So I go back to him the next time and said, look, I've read about this, and, once it quits working, you don't have any more options. You can do radiation, you can do
and that was called castration resistant.
Yeah, castration resistant
cancer.
Yeah. Castration resistant, yeah. So anyway, once it goes in that mode, you don't have any options. You know, you can go do radiation, you can do cyberknife, you can do chemo. Chemo doesn't help prostate cancer, I found out. But anyway, I had already read about it. Sandy had too. So I told her, I said, well, Doc, can you recommend me to, like an oncologist or something? And he said, well, I just don't think you need it. I thought, well, I think I do. So we got in touch with I forget who recommended this doctor at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, the cancer center, Dr. Shinohara, a Japanese dude, very knowledgeable in his field. So we went over there to Vanderbilt, got an appointment, and they did another MRI. They looked at the original eczema PET scan, and then they did their own too, and they gave me 40 treatments of what they call IMRT radiation, which is a low-level radiation. That's the reason you do it 40 times. Whereas they have another one called SBRT, which you get like 5 or 6 treatments, and they just pretty much burn you up in those 5. So I did that every day, 5 days a week, for 8 weeks. And God bless the people that I worked with. They would let me every day work until it was time to go get my treatment. And then I would go get my treatment. I'd be gone 2 hours, most days. And then they let me come back and work the rest of the day and work late to make up the time. And they did that for 8 weeks. And sometimes those treatments, by the time I get back to work, I was feeling like death eating a cracker, as they say. But I just toughed it out. I didn't want to have to take leave and not get paid. So I just toughed it out, and I did it for all those times. So, and my urologist that was just going to let me use the ADT, do the ADT, he didn't. He was a little smug about it, I thought, because I went above his head basically, and chose my own path, and so I did that, and then after that, getting back to the original point, had I listened to this doctor as well, I don't know how long the ADT would have worked.
I read about that too.
It could have worked for 3 months, 6 months, 10 months, a year, 2 years.
And that's the theme that I took away from it too. Like it's only a matter of time before it stops working, and then your PSA starts creeping back up again. It's your body's, or the cancer is going to find a way to thrive.
Yeah, that's what it does.
With or without androgens.
Yeah, it's like it knows how to survive.
If you had that part to do it, because you also something that I'm a firm believer in. I remember earlier on you fasted for 7 days.
I did.
And you had your PSA checked before and after, and I remember after it was a 25% drop in your PSA, and that was before you did anything. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I did a 7-day fast, and then later on I did like a 4-day fast, and it was just no food, water only.
So at the point to where you had the ADT and your PSA was back down again, your testosterone was 0, but you still had the lymph node cancer going on. You knew that. At that point, why wouldn't you try to fast again? Or if you had it to do over again, I guess my question is, would you have tried to fast first before you did all those treatments?
I may have, because I may have, because the radiation, it killed the cancer, because my PSA went to flat 0 and stayed there for a good while. But treatments have side effects, and like right now, it's been 5 years since I had any treatment of ADT or any radiation. It's been 5.5 years, and now I've got I've got stasis, neuropathy in my feet, and so far so good. I treat that every day to try to keep that from getting out of hand, because Stasis is bad enough on its own, and neuropathy is bad enough on its own. But when you have both, you wind up they'll be wanting to amputate your feet. And I'm not going to go there ever.
Here's a question that I've never even asked you. Do you get these Axumin PET scans done anymore?
No.
Why not?
Well, because my PSA hasn't gotten back up to where I think I might need it, and the doctor told me he would not order it until my PSA got to 0.5, and right now it's at 0.17, 0.172 or something like that. So it's just barely negligible, and I think at that low rate, I'm not sure if even an Axumin scan would show anything.
But you had another one of those done after all your radiation treatments, and there was nothing.
No, I didn't have another one afterwards. No,
You didn't.
no, but my PSA went down to 0, and so that meant there was no prostate-specific antigen in my body anywhere. So, no, I didn't have another one. Now, if it gets to 0.5, again, I'll get the Axumin PET scan, or they got one now they call PSMA. It's supposed to even be more sensitive than Axumin, and so I will probably ask for that, and just try to find out if I have cancer, and if so, where is it?
And that scan it's specific to prostate?
No, it's not.
But
I think they have different type. Now, I might be wrong. I'd have to look it up. But I think they have different types. One for like breast cancer, one for prostate cancer, one for other cancers, depending on what kind of solution they put in your bloodstream to be able to detect cancer cells. But I know the PSMA initially, when it first got introduced, it was mainly for prostate cancer.
I guess initially, the reason that I wanted to have you on is because just a thought that entered my head is throughout all of that stuff that we just talked about, you found out in Florida, you had the biopsy, you found out you had cancer while you were in Florida, and you went through all this treatment with the ADT and the high frequency ultrasound thing and the radiation, and you never stopped coming to this gym. You didn't.
No.
And I remember you would always say you didn't feel like getting up out of your chair.
That's true.
But you did. You got up out of the chair and you.
Well, when I didn't come, you called me and told me to get my ass up there.
Yeah, I did. I remember doing that several times.
You did a bunch of times. Yeah, and then a lot of times I would come on, and then sometimes I'd say,
Yeah. Well.
No.
But nevertheless, you still were consistently here, and I would call you and tell you to get up because I didn't want you to just sit there and wither away to nothing.
Well, I didn't either, because I know if I sat there in that recliner, there's only one thing you got to look forward to, and that's you're going to die. Because you're letting your body deteriorate, and I'm not strong anymore like I was, and I can't be with very little testosterone in my system. But what I'm really trying to just keep doing is to keep my muscles and bones accustomed to being worked, to keep them as strong as they can be.
Sure. And here it seems like in the last 6 months, a lot of studies are coming to the surface and being presented to the world about how muscle mass is linked to your longevity and your ability to make it through things like cancer or any disease, really.
That may have helped me.
Yeah, because like we said, when you were 67, you were 225, 30 pounds.
235,
and you were, you weren't fat. I mean, you were big and strong.
Yeah.
Still.
I had very little fat.
Still moving good weight in the gym, and you were 64, 63 when you won the Tennessee.
Yeah, and the Brandon Curry Classic, and all that. So,
For anybody who doesn't know, he's also won some bodybuilding shows. But, he's got really, obviously, good genetics because he passed them down to me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and you're welcome for the coaching as well. He had the best coach, too, but I had the best genetics. But so anybody who's got an excuse whether you're down in the dumps, stressed out, or even have cancer. And anybody who's trained up under me knows that I don't put up with any excuses whatsoever. I mean, I'll call you out 100%. There are no excuses. And when you look at people like you who still found the motivation to get up out of your chair and make it to the gym and do something, that eliminates anybody who could possibly have an excuse for me. And not just you, but people who are in a wheelchair, people who break bones or whatever. There's always something that you can do just to get up and move your body. And ultimately, moving your body I think that heals you too, just getting up and moving around. So
one thing we hadn't touched on really is food. And I know you and I disagree a little bit about this. But for about 6 years, 6.5 years, I was more or less totally vegan. And that was because of research that Sandy and I had done, mainly her, about some of the elements in meats that are just terrible for prostate cancer, or breast cancer. So that was a big change too. That was huge, because it wasn't by choice, but we read studies about it, and again, I know you and I don't see quite eye to eye on that, but I read studies about it, and there seems to be in meats and poultry, turkey and chicken, beef, bison, all those element called choline. I can't remember if it's a vitamin or a mineral. But the studies that we read, men who were like me that had prostate cancer, done treatments, but egg yolks.
right, eggs are full of choline.
Huh?
They're full of choline.
You're full of choline, the yolk. But I eat whites all the time. Just ate some a few minutes ago. But this one study we read had 900 men in it, and it was in one of the Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, Norway. I want to say Finland. But men just like me who had prostate cancer, they put half of them to be vegan, but half of them kept eating eggs and meat and all that sort of thing. And the ones that kept on eating like that had an 80% greater chance of the prostate cancer coming back and killing them. Now, some of the other guys did too, in all honesty, but it seems that choline in the meat and the eggs especially are not good if you've had prostate cancer.
I always question I would agree 100% that the meats, the majority of the meats that are in the grocery store are garbage.
Yeah.
What they feed them, the hormones they give them, the antibiotics they give them. So I wouldn't say there's no chance that that's linked at all. I wouldn't say that at all. I think that having better choices when it comes to what meats you do, whether it be grass-fed and grass-finished organic meats, would be obviously a better choice. But yeah, I'm not naive enough to say, oh, well, there's no way that, you know what I mean? I'm not completely disagreeing with you, but I always look for holes in that research for sure.
I know. You read the China study, and we read the China study.
Yeah, I even watched documentaries on that.
So there's controversy about that, but in my case, all these things that I've done, the diet, the treatments, we hadn't even talked about the Rife machine yet. It's been working for me so far. I've been dealing with this for 8.5 years now, or 8 years, a little over 8 years. And so when it's been working for you, you tend to want to stick with it, And so that's what I've been doing. And God bless Sandy. She actually has done more research than me. She's the one that found those studies, and she probably helped save my life. So she's been great through all this.
Yeah, I remember.
She's been understanding and supportive That's another thing too. You 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 kind of have to have support. Now, if you don't have support, it's not essential to have support, but it certainly helps.
Sure.
And I'm a member of 2 or 3 different prostate cancer support groups on Facebook, and some of these stories they're terrible. It's like a man gets, and it works both ways, but a man gets prostate cancer, and he's not the man he used to be, and some of the wives just up and leave. Which is not good. And of course, I know that works other ways too. I know there's men that have probably left their wives once they were diagnosed with cancer, but to me, that's just beyond comprehension that somebody would do that. If your life partner, if you really love them, you're not going to leave them when they get diagnosed with a bad disease like cancer.
I remember Sandy was very supportive of you throughout that whole thing, and I remember hearing her talk about some of the studies that she was reading, and we had conversations about it while you were here in the gym. And I remember your radiation treatments because I rode out there to several of them with you.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, thank you. That was supportive. Sometimes they'd make me sick, so sick.
I remember that. I remember. But morals of the story here is you don't have an excuse. Don't make excuses. Just get it done. Get up and move your body. And don't trust your doctor. Do your own research. That was one of the things you wanted to drive home with this. One of your points that you wanted to drive home is just don't do your own research. Don't just blindly trust your doctor, because you really are just a number to them. You're just part of their daily routine. They don't care about you.
They want to treat you until you die, and then go to the next person.
Yeah, and with the drug industry, I mean, this is getting into a whole nother realm.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Which gets into politics too, but they're really just there to make money, and they're there to make drug companies money. So if they can give you drugs in the ADT, that's one of them. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't help, but it made them money at the same time.
Yeah.
So just do your research. If you do end up with something, do your own research about it. Feel good about the treatment, and it may save your own life. So, anyway.
Well, something else I haven't mentioned too is like, I think God showed me a path to be able to survive this, and He, with Sandy helped me, and He gave me the determination. It's like I never even really thought about giving up, where a lot of people did, but He made me determined, and showed me things, and through Sandy and through my own research. So I have to give credit there too.
And maybe so you could teach other people and save other people's lives. Because most people do just go to the doctor and they're just like, oh, I need a biopsy. Okay. Oh, I don't need that Zoom-in PET scan. Okay, we'll just do the other one. Oh, I've got a clean bill of health. Cool. They'll go home and party. And all the while, they've still got cancer.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think that your experience, if the word gets out enough, I think that knowledge in itself about the biopsies and about doing the right kind of scans and when you should do them, I think that could save a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, I think it could.
So, anyway, well, thank you for being on, Pop.
No problem. Hope it helps somebody.
Yeah, I think it will. If people watch this and pay attention to what we're saying, I guarantee that they can learn from your experiences. So,
if anybody has any questions about any specifics, I'm on Facebook. You can find me real easy. Just give me a message.
Yeah, or Instagram. You're on Instagram, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mike Norris, ladies and gentlemen, Papa, aka Papa. Thank y'all for watching, and we'll see you next time.